Here in New York, we have a group of women who go down to Times Square and they peel out of their clothes and they paint themselves with body paint and they take pictures with people for tips. Now, a lot of people here in New York say that they have an issue with these topless women in Times Square and that they are bringing down the quality of life in the area and the quality of life in the city. And we have your Democratic Mayor Bill De Blasio and the Police Commissioner Bill Bratton saying that there's not much they can do. Now, while it is perfectly legal for a woman to be topless here in New York City, it's just not morally right. I have seen pictures of these women where they take pictures with children, where they take pictures with teenagers, and even with police officers. And, a lot of people say that they cannot find a constructive solution for this because the toplessness is legal. But here's the other part of it. It's not legal for you to solicit business without a business permit. And this is the point of law that, could easily be used to shut down these topless women with no problems because you do need to have a business license and a business permit, in order to do any type of business on the street. This is one of the reasons why I don't sell books on the street is because you need to have a vendor license or a business license. And you would think, in the case of these topless women, this would be the point that the mayor would use to, shut down this debauchery in Times Square. Now, you have the police commissioner and the mayor saying that there isn't much of a problem here, but this is where we start with the slippery slope. First, it's the topless women, and then later on, it's other things, because this is how things start to decline. This is why, people don't like Democratic mayors and Democrats in general, because they allow things to start a slow, slippery slope. They let one thing pass, and then people then further decide to push the boundaries. And the whole thing is, this, again, is an easy solution. You have to have a business permit, you have to have a business license in order to sell on the street. I mean, any of these vendors out here, they have to follow health codes and they have to have, business license or some sort of vendor license in order to sell products on the street. Now, you would think this would be the point that the mayor would use to try to shut this down, but, this Democratic mayor, he pretty much hasn't really thought about this. And then you had people in the legislature or councilmen talking about they wanted to ban all topless people, which is basically, another straw man argument that doesn't work. I mean, this is a very simple solution. Everybody who has to go out, you have to have. And if you're doing business in the street on a regular basis, you have to have some sort of permit to be on the street. I mean, back in the day, that's what they used to tell black people all the time. When they tried to sell things on the street, they would tell them, "Look, where's your permit? Where is your license? You have to have some sort of thing." And the same argument could be used to deal with these topless women in Times Square. They could be told, "Look, you cannot be out here without a business permit of some type or some type of license from the city." And that's where they could regulate all these street performers and all these people. Because in order to perform in the subway, you have to have a permit. You have to have MTA approval. And the same thing on the city streets. You have to have some sort of permit from the city and some way of showing that, you are on record with the city as a business entity. And this is how they could have shut down, the topless women in Times Square. But your Bill de Blasio is completely clueless on, business policy and economic policy and doing things that improve the quality of life. Personally, I would like to see Times Square go back to being a street with traffic. I always thought that was one of the big mistakes of the Bloomberg administration was taking Times Square and turning it into that pedestrian walkway. I mean, yeah, it's nice for tourists, but as a guy who's been living in New York for 41 going on 42 years, it's a street. It's for traffic. It's not a plaza. I mean, if you want to build a park, you build a park. And, Times Square is not really meant to be a park. I remember when it was a street, and that's all it's supposed to be. I mean, yeah, you want the travel and tourism, but when you have topless women, it brings Times Square, back to the bad old days of the 1980s. But I mean, because this is not, conducive to creating a positive environment. Because there's a Toys R Us, not too far from there, and all the kids, go there. I've been down to Times Square on numerous occasions, doing errands or, looking at different action figure lines. Um, and I would see these women and I would just walk right by them. Wouldn't, take too much of a look. Now, I like myself some attractive women, but this is just gratuitous and it just really brings down the quality of life. And, it takes you back to the late 1980s when I remember when all the porno theaters were there and the strip bars, and that really made the Times Square, one of the seediest places in New York City. And to see, the nonchalance from, Bill De Blasio and his just ineffectiveness in this situation, not using this little simple technicality as a way to, shut this down, because the hot dog vendors and all these other people, they would be told they would have to have, a permit in order to sell on the street. They would be told that they would have to have a license, and they were told that they had to have running water and all these other things. But your topless woman taking a picture is not told that she has to follow, you know, basic business procedure. I mean, if she's taking tips or whatever, that constitutes a business transaction. And if it constitutes a business transaction, it has to be regulated by the state, and also can be, taxed by the state. But your Democratic mayor, he's so afraid of offending women that he doesn't want to take action that would be constructive in improving the quality of life in the city. This, again, can be shut down easily if you come in and come on these points. And I look at your Democratic mayor, and he's just Bill De Blasio, and he's just showing how ineffective he is in these situations. I mean, this is something, again, can easily be shut down by just looking at a basic point of law, which is if you don't have a business permit, you cannot be on the street soliciting in any way, shape, or form. You have to have a business license of some type, in order to do that. And everybody else has to do that. You would think that would be in this case, but I look at this case, and, it shows me the total ineffectiveness of this Bill De Blasio and his De Blasio administration, and how he lets stuff get a pass. But then again, this is the same, mayor who does not really, is not hands-on. He doesn't have a direct connection, with the people in the city. I mean, his hands-off nonchalance on certain city issues, pretty much shows me that he's the wrong guy for the job. I mean, I'm looking at New York City, and I've been living here, again, all my life, and it's slowly on a slide. I mean, in the last 2 years, New York has gone from, a safe place where the rent is too blank high to a place that is slowly on a decline in terms of quality of life and quality and just basic lifestyle. I'm seeing numerous, businesses closing. I'm seeing crime going up. And as I've stated, in my Summer of the Savage series, and then you have, the mayor and the police commissioner twiddling their thumbs, telling us things like was the safest summer of the year, when you had numerous, homicides, and you had 24 shootings in 5 days. Yet it's considered, safest summer of the year. Again, 24 shootings in 5 days in one, and 13 shootings in one weekend. And these guys are sitting there thinking that this is like, you're in denial, because I can see the decline coming. And in the last 2 years, city has gone, on a slow and steady, pace back to the bad old days of the 1980s. And the topless women are pretty much, part of that. And these are things that can easily be rectified with simple solutions. But because this mayor is so hands off and so nonchalant, in his administering of the city and being the chief executive of the city, the quality of life, is starting that slow decline. I mean, things like those burglaries that happen in these so-called gentrified areas, all this is stuff that should have been dealt with. And the whole thing is that if you can't deal with topless women, then how can you deal, effectively with other issues? Because all these issues slowly turn into a larger and bigger picture. And I'm looking at the big picture of this administration. And if you can't deal with topless women, then how can you deal with, other serious issues that affect things? Because this, again, affects the quality of life, which affects your travel and tourism and which also affects, the bigger picture as it relates to, bringing revenue into the city. Because I myself, I don't mind topless women, but I do not like it in areas where there are quite a few children about. Like there's Toys R Us right down the street. Kids are coming in and out of there on a regular basis. It's just not appropriate for that area. And this is just, it looks like exploitation and a return to the bad old days. This is not um, something that is tasteful, and it's the kind of thing that leads to a slow and long slippery slope. And again, the solution is right in front of the mayor, in front of the police commissioner, and they won't enforce it. Because I look at it, you won't enforce it on these you know white women and Hispanic women and whatever they are down in Times Square. But if a black man opened up a table and was vending items, the same police officers would ask that black man for his permit. And this is the same case. You could ask for the same thing, and that could shut that down. But this is something that your mayor won't, Bill De Blasio won't do, and it just shows how ineffective he is as a mayor and as the chief executive of the city. And I see that his term. I really wish people would take a look at this guy again and see how ineffective he is, because this is not the direction you really want to take New York City in. I mean, this is how the city started its slow decline in the 60s and the 70s. They just let little stuff pass, and I see that same direction happening all over again, because I lived in New York all my life, and I've seen the city, at its worst, and I've seen it at its best. And right now, it looks like the city is in a state of decline, and everybody, has their head in the sand, and they don't see, how these little things lead to a bigger picture. And again, all of it can be easily solved, with simple solutions, but nobody wants to take those simple solutions, such as asking these women for, business license or a business permit, and closing that right there. I mean, this when you ask for the business permit, basically you're saying you're coming to them not from the state of the legality of toplessness or the morality of it. You're coming to them from a business perspective and asking them, have you followed, basic city law? And when you follow city law, that pretty much shuts all that down. Um, and that's the easiest solution as I see it, for this whole topless women in New York. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.